thing on their website where you can put your items in there and see if it's a collision. So some of it, I guess, still could be saved.
Yeah, but still, actually, a lot of standard talking about do not use SHA-1 years ago.
Yeah.
Because there has been a paper years ago. But this one is a big step.
Yeah, that's impressive that they did that.
You're right about half.
So what MIT did was like
Why do you think you're funny? Somebody, he didn't even laugh at his own joke. He knows he's not funny.
That's not ours.
Okay, let's get started. So we have been talking about disk forensics, email forensics, and today we are going to switch the gear a little bit. So far we have been talking about damage, all kinds of damage. But today we are going to talk about code. We're going to talk about malicious code, malware, and what kind of forensic analysis we can perform on malicious code. And we are going to do several exercises. I will spend two classes on malware analysis, and the first one will be overview, so the exercise will be easier, and the next one will be a little bit challenging. So two announcements. So first, no class next Friday because of spring break, and after that we'll have a paper report due on the week after that. So then we're going to talk about malware and malware forensics. So what is malware? So basically, that is just malicious software or any kind of malicious code. So the code is just a set of instructions that run on your computer and make your system to do something attackers want it to do. And those instructions can be very low level, like binary, like CPU instructions, RAM. And it can also be just commands or scripts. They don't have to be CPU instructions. So those instructions are not necessarily malicious. They're just CPU instructions or commands. So the reason to make those malicious software malicious is not those instructions, but the intention of the attackers. So that's why actually identify or classify something as malicious is really hard, because it's not a technical problem. You need to understand what is the intention of the people who wrote the program. For example, if you write a script to delete all the files on your disk, it could be totally benign. That's your you have the authority to do that on your local disk. But if you run that on someone else's computer, that is probably malicious. But they are actually the same code. So malware forensics is basically just perform forensic analysis on those malicious code. Try to figure out who is behind those malicious code and try to understand more about this malicious code. So what malware is good for? So right now, 10 years ago, malware are just targeting probably one computer or several computers. And now they are trying to compromise as many computers as possible and try to collect those computers together. And that is called botnet. So on one computer, a malware, they can steal personal information, your credit card information. They can install a keylogger there to record all the key. Whatever you press on your keyboard, it will be recorded. And then they can steal your password. They can delete your files. And if all those compromised computers are grouped together, they can be used to send the spams, click fraud, and do other things. They can use all those computers as a relay as a springboard to do other kind of attacks. So for all these years, the researchers, they have been classifying malwares into different categories, give them names. But obviously, those malwares, they are developed by attackers. When they develop a malware, they have a goal, they have a plan they want to do. So they will never do something like I will develop a virus, I will develop a rootkit. They have a goal there. So the boundary between those types are really blurry. But still, some of the types are very old. The first type is called a virus, and it was coined in 1983. And that is basically the very early stage of any kind of malware. So all the antivirus software you are using, they are still using antivirus. That's because that is the first kind of malware. But when they talk about the antivirus now, they're talking about basically all kinds of malware. So the characteristic of a virus is a program that can infect other programs by modifying itself to include a version of itself. So this is like a very early stage. So most of the malwares we see today, they don't do this anymore. Some of them still, but most of them don't. So what do we mean by infect here? So let's say we have a malware. It is an executable. It can be executed by the CPU. And it has a targeted executable, which is a benign. It could be on Windows, it could just be your calculator. So somehow if you execute this malware, and this malware will try to find your Windows calculator and put itself in the Windows calculator file. So whenever the next time you execute the Windows calculator, you actually will execute the malware first. So this is a basic idea. So it is infect other programs by modifying it and put a version of itself there. So there are many techniques to do that. They can put it themselves in the front of this infected host executable, or they can put it at the end. So the difference is it could be harder for them, for antivirus to detect something like that. Or they can cut itself into pieces and insert in the middle of the file. So all kinds of approaches can be used here. So another tool usually used by hackers, usually used by malwares or virus is called packers. So there is a famous packer called ASP. And what it does is, let's say we have a malware, and the malware and the infected executables will be packed together as the payload. So when we say payload, which means this part is not, it cannot be executed directly. It's not code anymore. This is just encrypted data. And the packer is at the front of this binary file. So when the packer is loaded into the operating system and executed, the packer will first unpack the payload, because this is like encrypted data. It will unpack it, so we have executable code. Then the packer will give the control to the malware, or give the control to the hosted executable. So this could be your Windows calculator, and this is malware, and this is a packer. So packer itself is not necessarily malicious. There are many reasons to use a packer. For example, you develop a software, you want to protect your software. You don't want your software to be reverse engineered by anyone. So you may use a packer to protect it. So the packer usually can compress your program. But this is different from any kind of a compressor, like WinZip or 7-zip, because when you zip your executable, what you get is a zip file. You cannot directly run it. But a packer is still an executable. Just a part of it is compressed. And it can also encrypt your executable, so it's hard for others to analyze. And it can use all kinds of randomization, like polymorphism, or even other dynamic techniques like anti-debugging techniques to make sure other people cannot, or it's hard for them to reverse engineer your software. There are other techniques like anti-virtual machine. For example, a lot of virtual machine cloud-based techniques are used to automatically analyze software, like Google Bouncer. So when you use Google Play, so all the software you download, all the Google apps, all the apps you download from Google Play, they have been analyzed by a tool called Google Bouncer. So basically, Google Bouncer is just a cloud of a lot of virtual machines, Android virtual machines. If you are a developer, when you submit your app to Google Play will put that in the Google Bouncer and run your application and try to figure out if your application is doing something malicious. So if your application can detect if it is running in a virtual machine or a physical form, it can change its behavior based on that. So if it's a malicious software, it may not do anything malicious when it is running in the Google Bouncer. However, when you actually download it in your physical form, it will perform something malicious. So this kind of technique is called like anti-VM, anti-virtual machine. So actually, we started something like this also for Android. So the second type of malware I want to talk about is backdoors. So the idea is very simple. One of malware will somehow infect your host, and it will open a remote shell for others, for attackers. So the attacker can remotely control the compromised machine. So in this way, the first idea is to set up a server in the infected host. So set up a server in the infected host so the attackers can just use TCP to connect to that server. However, there are many problems of this approach for attackers. For example, the infected host could be in a local network. So it doesn't have a public IP. So even if the attackers can set up a server in the infected host, if it is not in the same local network, it cannot collect to this machine. So there is another technique called reverse backdoor or reverse shell. So basically, the attackers will set up a server with a public IP address, and the infected host will collect to that attacker. However, the command were sent by attackers to the infected host through this channel. That's why this is called a reversed shell. So if you do share code or you do all kinds of CTF, you will use all kinds of exploits or all kinds of payloads there. And some of the payloads you will notice that they have names like a reverse shell. So basically, this is what it means. And obviously, you don't have to, the attackers do not have to use TCP. They can use other protocols like ICMP to do something like this. So if they do ICMP, it will be harder for the intrusion detection systems to detect, and also harder for the antivirus to detect if there is anything suspicious going on. The third type is Trojan. So basically, this is a class of malware that appears to perform a desirable function, but in fact performs some undisclosed malicious functions. So this is very easy to understand. For example, there was a very famous screensaver for Windows. So normal users, they just believe this is a screensaver, but actually when it runs, it will unload some hidden programs, commands, scripts, and users, they do not know the screensavers is doing something like that. The fourth type is called Rootkit, and Rootkit is usually a component that uses stealth to maintain a persistent and undetectable presence on the machine. So the previous types we have talked about, Trojan, virus, they are basically running at the user level. They are taking operating system class. So they are more like applications. They are malicious applications. So they do not have more privileges than your browser or your Microsoft Office. They are running at the same privilege, which means you can see those information. So some privileged programs like the kernel can always know that process is running, and they can detect probably that process is malicious. For example, you can use a task manager to see all the processes that is running on your Windows box. So it cannot really be hidden there. So Rootkit is something more privileged. It usually runs in the kernel. Not necessarily, but most Rootkit, because the word root means the user root, but actually it can mean something more privileged, which is the kernel. So, so usually what, especially for those kernel rootkit, what they do is they have some kernel modules. So they are going to change the kernel directly. How can they benefit from this? In your operating system class, you may learn that all the tasks in Linux system, they are linked together with a task structure, and there are several lists. And the scheduler of your Linux operating system will use that list to schedule all the tasks. And also, your task manager will use that list to show all the tasks. So basically, if the rootkit is a kernel module itself, you can directly change, manipulate those kernel objects, like those task lists. You can remove itself or remove any other application from that list. So your task managers cannot see that. But still, the program is still running it. And also, because it's in the kernel, it can do anything it wants to do. It can hook all the file access. Whenever you access a file as a user, probably the rootkit is trying to record everything you put there and send out to the network port. And it can do memory management, network management. Basically, it can do anything it wants to do. And it's very hard to detect because it is running at the same level as the kernel. So previously, the antivirus systems, they are running in the username. They're just an app. So they cannot detect something like that. But even if your antivirus is running in the kernel, it's still hard to detect because they are running at the same level. So they are competing there. So the rootkit can change your antivirus system. So the latest advancement in this field is more like putting your protection systems like antivirus or intrusion detection in a more privileged mode, like a hypervisor. So yeah, hypervisor, like in cloud, you put that in your Dyn hypervisor. Then on top of that, you're running Windows or Linux. They have kernel, right? Or there are other approaches, like hardware-based approaches. Basically, you have another specific hardware which is not directly controlled by the kernel, but that hardware can do all kinds of security analysis on the kernel. So here is how a kernel rootkit could work. So basically, PS is a program in Linux. It's like the task manager in Windows. So the rootkit can just change the kernel, can hook this part. And whenever you run PS, the rootkit will just hide process 3. So you will never see process 3 there, but actually it is running there. For Windows, this is for Linux, but for Windows, basically the same thing. The philosophy is the same. You just need to change different modules in the kernel. In Windows, the kernel is in an image called ntos kernel.exe. Even though it has the extension name .exe, this is not executable file you can directly run. This is actually the kernel image. So also, they can do device drivers. Basically, device driver is just another kind of a kernel module. And when you change kernels, usually you develop a device driver. But it is not necessarily associated with any kind of a physical device. We just call it a device driver, but actually they are just kernel modules sometimes. They can be associated with device, but they don't have to. And another kind of rootkit or bootkit is just try to change the NBR. Like we discussed several times in the class, NBR is just, at the beginning of the NBR is just a piece of code, probably 40 or 30 bytes of code. So next class, we are going to dump the NBR and try to understand that part of code. And at that time, you can think, if you are the attacker, what kind of changes you want to make there to make that NBR malicious. So if the malware tries to change the NBR, it's very hard for the operating system to detect, because when the operating system boots, NBR has already been executed. So there is no way OS can detect if the NBR was valid like 20 seconds ago. Because even if after the OS boots, the OS can retrieve the NBR and try to check if that NBR is valid, but that may not be the exact NBR that was executed 20 seconds ago. Because it could do something malicious, then hide it, then give the control to the operating system. So this is a flow of how CPU boots, how a computer boots. We talked about this before. First, we have BIOS. Then BIOS gives the control to NBR, which is the first sector on the disk. It will be loaded to the memory, and that NBR will load VBR, something like that, and other operating system boot sectors, and eventually load the operating system images and also kernel images. So how to detect this kind of attack, NBR or NBR-based attack or Bootkit? Usually we will use something called a TPM, Trusted Platform Module. And TPM is a separate small chip. Usually it's not very expensive, just $2-3 or even less expensive. So right now, all the ASU computers, all the desktop you are using in the lab, we all enabled TPM. So which means that whenever the system boots, the TPM will first measure the system, measure every part of the system, measure the memory of the system, measure the disk of the system, to check if they are in a valid state. If they are not, the TPM will refuse to boot the computer. If they are, then the TPM will give the CPU the signal to boot, to start the normal boot process. So, and also all the laptops you have right now, they have TPM. Yeah.
Do rootkits and bootkits give up to computers the same way that like viruses and stuff on computers, or do they give up?
So there are many ways to propagate or get infected, right? So basically, all those like a virus, they can get to a computer because you did something wrong. You clicked the wrong you click the wrong link in an email, like phishing or something. But rootkit is different because it has to get the privilege. So it has to, even if you click that, it will try to exploit some kind of vulnerability in your operating system. Because when you click it, when you run it, it's just a normal application. So it has to exploit that some vulnerability in your system to get into the kernel. Yeah. So that's why that part is covered. And there is another type we'll talk about. They have a different way of propagation later. This is so worm is another type. It has a different way of propagation. So basically, worm is a self-replicating computer program. It can use a network to send copies of itself to other computers. And the users, they don't need the users' intervention. For example, the virus one, the phishing one, you have to click a wrong link. You have to click the executable you're not supposed to click. But worms, they don't have to do that. So usually, they just exploit some security flaws in your operating system. And they exploit that remotely. For example, your computer is running an Apache server. And that Apache server has a buffer overflow. So what an attacker can do is they will send malicious code to your Apache server. Obviously, it's through HTTP. Probably there is a buffer overflow in the HTTP protocol stack. So it can override that protocol stack and give control to itself and execute that kind of code, malicious code on your machine. So the user, if you are the administrator of that Apache server, you didn't do anything wrong. You didn't click any wrong link. You didn't run any malicious executable. But the attack is still successful. So this kind of malware is called a worm. But obviously, like I said, the boundary between them is really blurry. A worm can be combined with a rootkit. You will use a worm, you will use the first HTTP vulnerability to propagate to a new machine. Then you will use another vulnerability to get into that machine's kernel. So when the attackers, they develop software, they do not confine themselves. I'm just designing a rootkit. I'm just designing a worm. They're not doing that. So the first known worm was developed by a professor from MIT, Robert Morris. So actually that time he was a student, he was still a PhD student or master student. So he designed the first worm. And that worm infected almost 6,000 machines. And that is 10% of the computers connected to the internet at that time. And it was said it cost 10 millions for everyone to fix it. Then there were other famous worms, like a code red worm. It happened in early 2000. So it was developed upon Morris worm and infected many servers. So this is very real. And also the Lovebug worm, it was said that it cost the world like $8 billion to fix this. So we have the first virus, maybe starting from 1981, and we can say we have many new kind of malware, and this figure is kind of old. It has been 10 years, and still now the malware problem is not solved. It's still very hard to solve. There are many reasons. One of the fundamental reasons I believe is, like I said, it's really hard to tell if something is malicious because it's not a technical problem. It's more about the attention behind it. So all the antivirus we're using right now, they are still using, most of them, they're still using signatures. So signature to detect malware. So basically, signature is just a very long string. And that string matches with some known malwares. But does that mean that string will only appear in that malware? It's not. It's not true. Even though they are making that string very long, so the chance for that string to appear in any other benign software, the chance is very low. But that is not really the root cause why this is a malware. That's not the root cause. That is just something unique we find there. But obviously attackers, they can change those strings. If they know the signature, they can change that. And many ways to change that. They can use hackers to encrypt that. So when that string is encrypted, it's not there anymore. So antivirus cannot detect that. So another trend in this area is using machine learning to detect, to classify malware. But still, it's still very hard. It's not something we can fully rely on. So the major difference between worm, virus, and Trojan horse. So virus is code embedded in a file or a program. It will infect other programs or file. And the Trojan, and both of them, virus and Trojan, they will rely on human intervention. You have to click it to run it. But worms, they are self-contained. They can exploit the vulnerabilities in your operating system. They can propagate themselves. Okay? So besides all kinds of those malware we talk about, there are many new malwares now. There are malwares try to hijack your browser. I say this before. I don't know how I get it, but I think several years ago, every time I Google something like a bank or something, there will be a fake Chase website pops up. I don't know how I get the malware, but I always say a fake Chase website. So which means there is a malware. It is injected into my browser. It knows what I am Googling there and try to phish me based on what I'm Googling there. And there are adware. Basically, they just show a lot of ads. This is probably how they get money. And also a browser toolbox. This is this is like maybe probably 10 years ago, something like this. It was very popular. Some of you may know this. And also emails. This is like some phishing emails, and they give you a link here, and that link could be, in this case, this is executable. So if you download it, you run it, your computer is infected. But sometimes it is not necessarily executable. It could just be a link, and that link has some JavaScript. And the JavaScript can, so in this case, if you download this, you are directly running this in your operating system. But if it's just a link with JavaScript, then that JavaScript is executed inside your browser. But it may try to exploit some vulnerabilities of your browser. From your browser, it can get to your operating system. It can run binary code, something like this. Then from there, it can try to exploit the vulnerability of your operating system to get into the kernel. And in the worst case, if you are running on a virtual machine, you can even try to get to your hypervisor, try to infect your hypervisor. And a lot of malware, they are trying to pretend to be something useful, like this is a fake codec. And very interesting is there are a lot of malwares, they try to look like antivirus software. So if, yeah, I think I say this one before too. So they look like antivirus, but they are actually malware. They're not antivirus. So how attackers and the adversaries, they can actually make money from this. At the beginning of this, like what Robert Morris did, he was doing that for fun. He was not trying to make money. But now cybercrime is a big thing. Those adversaries, they are actually making money from this. So first, they can steal your financial, email, or social network account, your credit card numbers, something like that. And there is another popular type of malware called ransomware. Basically, ransomware will try to encrypt everything on your computer and blackmail you, ask for money. And there are some other malwares like man in the browser. It will infect your browser. So if you visit your BOA account, you try to, after you log into your BOA account, that malware will automatically transfer some money to a dedicated account. And they can even hijack your website, so it's not even showing on your web page. The money has been transferred. So this is a screenshot of a very serious ransomware called a CryptoLocker. So a lot of people, including faculties at SU, fall victim for this ransomware. So it will basically use a very strong encryption to encrypt your whole hard disk. So they are using a very long key RSA. So RSA is a public key crypto system. So they will use the public key to encrypt your hard disk, and the private key probably was never even on your computer. So they may generate a pair of public key and private key on their server, and send the public key to your computer and use that public key to encrypt your whole hard disk. So the only way to decrypt that is to use the private key. But that private key was in their server, was never even in your computer. So even if you do forensic analysis, there is no way for you to find this private key. So they ask for 0.5 Bitcoins, depends on how much Bitcoin worth. I remember, because we did some study on this, the good thing about Bitcoin is all the transactions are public. You can see everything, right? As long as, so if you know the address, the Bitcoin address, oh, I don't know. So here is a Bitcoin address. So they ask you to send money to this Bitcoin address. So in our study, what we did is we try to analyze all the transactions to and from this address and combine multiple accounts together so we can see how much money has been sent to this account. So we find out that sometimes they ask for 2 Bitcoin, sometimes in this case just a half Bitcoin. But even 1 Bitcoin right now is like 120 bucks, or probably more than that. Yeah.
Closer to 1,000.
Yeah. Maybe more than 1,000, I guess. Yeah. So that's a lot of money. Yeah. So there are also ransomwares like that on your Android or iPhone. So they can lock your screen or encrypt your disk too. Yeah.
How did they get to your drive?
So a lot of them is because you fall victim for some kind of a phishing campaign. They send out an email to you and you click the button and you run with it.
It's an executable, you're executable.
Yes, and that's the most easy way for the attackers actually. So they just send out maybe 1 million phishing spam emails, and probably 100 of them were fall victim for it, and they still make a lot of money. And they don't have to do warm, they don't have to do rootkit, because it's technically more difficult. So people is the weakest link in any kind of system. So also last year we saw news like this: ransomware locks up San Francisco public transportation ticket machines. So I think I don't know, maybe they shut down the public transportation, or it was free for everyone that day. And also hospital falls victim to ransomware. This could be very serious. Imagine if the doctors are performing operations, then the computer is locked. So this could be very, so this is not only a security issue anymore, it's also a safety issue. So if that is how adversaries, they can make money from this, and if they can control a very large group of computers and form what we call a botnet, they can do something even more serious. For example, they can do DDoS attack. So in this case, they don't care about stealing information from one machine. They are more like using this botnet as a super powerful computing tool to do other kind of attacks. So they can do DDoS, they can send out spam, and there was one very interesting, where is that? So last year, actually, when we were having the network security class, and many of you may know that a lot of websites cannot be accessed that day. Twitter, basically, maybe half of the United States was affected by this. So basically, there was an attack called a Dyn Cyberattack. So Dyn is a large DNS provider. So this is a company that translate URLs to IP addresses. That's how you can visit different websites. So in that day, so the Dyn server was attacked. And that was attacked by a botnet called, yes, something like that. And the very interesting part of that botnet is all the zombies, all the bots in that botnet are not really powerful computers, not your laptop, not the virtual machines in Amazon AWS. They are just very less expensive IoT devices, like camera somewhere, like your baby monitor connected to internet. So all kinds of IoT devices. But combining them together, we can say that it still can do something magnificent. So in that day, the United States almost, the network was down. So actually, the websites like Twitter and Google, they were not directly affected. What affected was the DNS server. So if you know the IP address of Twitter, you can still visit Twitter. But most users, they don't have that kind of a technology background. So they only know how to use URL, right? So this can be very serious. So as a security analyst, as a white hat, what we can do, how we can analyze malware or bots or botnets. So basically, usually we will use a copy of malware samples, and that malware sample is just usually it's binary. It's binary code. It's just the executables. Obviously, attackers, they're not going to share their source code to you. So we have to do reverse engineering. And that is how we can analyze the malware, and also we can analyze malwares from network side. We can monitor all kinds of network traffic between bot and its server. Usually that server is called command and control servers. So how reverse engineering works. So this is a basic idea. So you are a developer, let's say. When you have any idea you want to develop a program, you will use some language like C++, Python, or Java to write your program, to express your idea. And those languages, they are very expressive. They are very high-level language. They are sometimes even like Python, very close to pseudocode. If you read a Python code, it's very easy for you to understand what this code is trying to do. Then those code will go through some compilers. And the compiler will generate binary code, or sometimes bytecode, for example, for virtual machine-based languages like Java. But those machine code, they are just instructions. And they can only be interpreted by CPUs or virtual machines. So it's very hard for a human to understand that. So when you want to share something to a friend, you want to share your idea, you usually will share your source code. That's what you do by pushing code to GitHub. So you are sharing your code and ideas. However, like I said, if there is an attacker, he is also trying to develop something fancy, and he will also use C++ or Java, and it will go through the same process and generate machine code. But they will never share that to us. They will never share that to security analysts. As a security analyst, as a detective, we have to look at the binary code or bytecode and try to figure out what this code is trying to do and who are the bad guys behind this. So this is what we are going to do
in today's in-class exercise and next class exercise. So one of the very interesting work I want to mention is 2009. There was a paper in CCS. The title was "My Botnet, Your Botnet is My Botnet: Analysis of a Botnet Takeover." So it was published in CCS by researchers from UCSB. So what they did is they reverse engineered a botnet sample and try to understand how it works. And surprisingly, they find out that that botnet is so the botnet there is always a server. So all the bots can talk to that server. And the servers, usually they will have different address. They will change the server's address every week, let's say every week. The reason for this is the server could be exposed and the FBI can take over the server. So they are changing that server address every week. But how could those bots know that new address? So there is already a dynamic algorithm in that bot. So the bot knows. The bot will get the current time and use the current time as an input to that domain generation algorithm, and it will generate a domain name, and that domain name will be the URL for this time. So they don't have to send the new address to each bot, but the bot knows the algorithm to generate the domain name in a box. So what they did is they reverse engineered that algorithm. So they figured out how it works. And they also find out one of the domain names has not been registered. So which means the botnet, all the bots are going to talk to that domain name. But the adversaries, the people really behind that, has not registered that domain name. So they registered that right away, which means they set up a server there and they wait there. So the bots will talk to their server in 2 weeks or somehow. So basically, using this technique, they took control of the whole botnet and started its operation for 10 days. And in that 10 days, they observed more than 180,000 infections and recorded almost 70 GB of data. And they observed that 1.2 million IP addresses contacted their server. So this is like the first botnet takeover in academia, very famous one. So this is how they figured how it works, which is not important. I will just show you something. So this is basically the domain generation algorithm. They reverse engineered. Obviously, it is binary code, and they rewrite it in a more understandable way. So this is how they know that that domain name will be used, and they figured that domain has not been registered. So they took it over for 10 days. They set up an Apache server to receive and log any bot requests, and they recorded all the network traffic. But they are not really sending any command back to the bots, because that would be illegal. If they do that, they are directly using the bot. So they are just passively collecting data there. So very interesting findings there. In that 10 days, they collected so many email addresses, the email account, all kinds of information. So each bot was trying to steal those malware on each infected computer is trying to steal information on that computer and send it back to the server. And this is what they find. They find HTTP account, email account, 1 million Windows passwords, and this is the account. They find it in financial institute, different banks. How many? Yes, almost 10,000 bank accounts there. and also a lot of credit card information. So what we're going to do next is, so today it's more like an overview of malware. So next class, we'll do some in-depth analysis, and I will go through some binary code with you, and we will do a very challenging task. Today, we're going to do something simple. First, we will look at a Windows PE format. So basically, all the Windows executables, all the Windows object files, they follow this PE format. So we have a tool for you to analyze this PE format. And also, today we're going to use a tool called IDA Pro to analyze some binary code. So IDA Pro is a very good tool, widely used by all the hackers. And it can be used for debugging, but it's most famous for static analysis. And there is another tool we're not going to use today. I used it a lot before. It's called Debug. So this is more like a debugger. So this is a screen of that. So you can see everything here is just a binary code. What?
What's it called?
Debug. This one is free. IDA Pro is not free, but we have a free version. So yeah. IDA Pro can be very expensive. Yeah. And besides manual analysis, so what we're going to do in class is more like manual analysis. But besides manual analysis, there are a lot of dynamic analysis tools available out there, including what we talked before, the Google Bouncer. So that is more like dynamic, automatic, dynamic analysis tool. So it will just monitor everything in the system, the file system, the memory, when one executable is running the system. And there are some services out there too, like Virus Total, like actually we, in our lab, we also have a service like this available. We build it on top of Cuckoo, which is also a dynamic analysis tool. So it's public, but we are not really advertising it because our cloud is not that mature right now. But so if we make it very robust, we will advertise it, and even you can try any kind of executable. You can submit any kind of executable to our server, and we will do dynamic analysis for you. So I will go through this first, and we'll talk about it later. So for today's in-class exercise, you have to uninstall the Windows antivirus, because the tool we're going to use, the antivirus will think it's a malicious tool, but actually it's not. But yeah, it's just trying to be very conservative. So we will do this later. Okay. So first we have, before that we have 2 more presentations. So who are the presenters? Okay. You want to go first? So one of the presentation is about file disk forensics, and another one is about malware forensics. Actually, the other one was my first paper when I started my PhD. So what I was trying to do was to extract some secrets from malwares. We try to automatically extract secrets from malware. Okay. You want to? Yes, sir.